Have you ever stopped to ponder the perplexing situation of Cain, one of the first sons of Adam and Eve, as described in the biblical narrative? How could he have found a wife, and even more intriguingly, how could he have fathered a child, considering Adam and Eve were portrayed as the sole progenitors of humanity? When we delve into the nuances and subtleties of the Bible, we uncover insights that attempt to unravel this ancient mystery. So, before we proceed, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and join us on this captivating journey of discovery. Cain, a central figure in biblical narratives, is introduced as the firstborn of Adam and Eve, marking the dawn of humanity. His relationship with his younger brother Abel becomes a critical focal point in the story of sacrifice to God. In an act of devotion, both brothers present offerings to the Lord, yet divine favor falls exclusively upon Abel's sacrifice, leaving Cain's offering rejected. The reason for this divine rejection remains shrouded in mystery, inspiring countless interpretations over the centuries. Some speculate about the quality or nature of Cain's offering, while others suggest that the issue lay within Cain's heart, an attitude or intention displeasing to God. This rejection fuels a growing bitterness in Cain, culminating in one of the darkest moments in human history, the first recorded act of fratricide. Overcome by jealousy and wrath, Cain takes Abel's life. This event not only marks the fragility and fallibility of human nature, but also serves as a sobering reminder of the far-reaching consequences of unchecked emotions and choices. The tragedy reverberates throughout biblical history, serving as a timeless warning about the repercussions of yielding to sin. God's response to Cain's act is swift and severe. Divine judgment falls upon him, and Cain is cursed and marked, bearing an eternal symbol of his transgression. While the Bible does not specify the exact nature of this mark, it serves as both a sign of Cain's guilt and a measure of divine protection. This mark ensures that Cain would not be slain by others seeking vengeance. However, the punishment extends beyond the physical; it penetrates the psychological and emotional realms. Cain is condemned to a life of wandering, exiled from the presence of God, carrying the weight of his choices. His isolation reflects not only physical separation but also spiritual and emotional alienation. In this state of wandering, Cain expresses fear of encountering others who might kill him. But who are these others? Were Cain and Abel truly the only children of Adam and Eve? The Bible offers a partial answer to this question in Genesis 4 verses 16 to 17. Despite his curse and exile, Cain finds a wife, establishes a family, and fathers a son named Enoch. This marks the beginning of a new lineage, a generation born from Cain's determination to rebuild and forge a path forward despite his exile. Surprisingly, Cain not only survives divine punishment but also thrives in his own way. He goes on to build a city, naming it after his son, Enoch. This city stands as a testament to human resilience, the ability to create, to endure, and to leave a legacy, even in the shadow of profound consequences. Cain's actions reflect a drive to establish a community, a legacy that transcends his wandering past. However, this part of the narrative raises even more questions. The biblical text does not provide explicit details about how Cain found a wife or who she was. Genesis 5 verse 4 provides a crucial clue, mentioning that Adam and Eve had other sons and daughters beyond Cain, Abel, and Seth. This suggests the possibility of Cain marrying one of his sisters, a practice that, in the earliest days of humanity, would have been necessary for the continuation of the human race. In those early generations, cultural and moral norms differed significantly from those established later in Mosaic law. Marriages between close relatives were not only permissible but essential for human survival and propagation. Examples of such unions appear elsewhere in the Bible, such as Abraham marrying his half-sister Sarah and Isaac marrying his cousin Rebekah. These unions were seen not only as practical but also as divinely blessed arrangements. It wasn't until much later, during the time of Moses, that laws prohibiting close familial marriages were instituted. These laws, outlined in Leviticus 18, emerged as a protective measure for both moral and genetic reasons, as humanity had multiplied and diversified enough to sustain itself without such unions. The story of Cain invites us to reflect deeply on themes of sin, consequence, redemption, and resilience. It reminds us of humanity's capacity for both destruction and creation, for wandering and for building anew. While many questions remain unanswered, the narrative encourages us to trust in the wisdom embedded within these ancient texts and to seek understanding with humility and reverence. If you found this exploration thought-provoking, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and check out the next video suggestions on your screen. Join us as we continue to uncover the profound mysteries of the Bible. The story of Cain, beyond the figures of Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel, emerges as an intriguing interpretation aimed at filling the gaps in the biblical narrative and addressing the questions surrounding the expansion of the human population in those uncertain times. A multitude of interpretations arises as scholars and theologians attempt to answer these mysteries. Among these interpretations, a less conventional theory suggests the possibility that God may have independently created other humans outside the immediate family of Adam and Eve. Proponents of this idea argue that a rapid multiplication of humanity would have required a significant population base, something difficult to achieve solely through the direct descendants of Adam and Eve. This perspective arises from efforts to reconcile the biblical narrative with archaeological and anthropological evidence, which indicates the presence of broader human communities in ancient times. However, it is essential to highlight that this interpretation remains speculative and lacks explicit support from the biblical text. The book of Genesis primarily focuses on the family of Adam and Eve and does not unequivocally mention the existence of other contemporary human groups. The more widely accepted theory suggests that Cain may have married one of his sisters, an interpretation grounded in the cultural practices and historical context described in the biblical narrative. Contrary to popular belief, Genesis does not state that Adam and Eve had only Cain and Abel as children. The lack of detailed information leaves open the possibility that Adam and Eve had other sons and daughters who were not explicitly mentioned in the scriptures. A central argument supporting this theory is the understanding that families during that era were significantly larger, and individuals had extraordinarily long lifespans. For example, the Bible mentions that Cain lived for several centuries. Such longevity makes it plausible that Adam and Eve could have had many more children, including sons and daughters not explicitly highlighted in the text. This interpretation gains further support when examining Genesis 5 verse 4, where it is stated that Adam lived 800 years after the birth of Seth and had other sons and daughters. This passage explicitly points to the existence of a larger family beyond Cain, Abel, and Seth. In that cultural and historical context, marriage between siblings was not only acceptable but also considered necessary for the propagation of the human race in its early stages. At that time, there were no explicit prohibitions against such unions. The cultural circumstances and survival demands likely influenced these practices. The absence of restrictions is further illustrated by other biblical examples where key figures married close relatives. One notable example is Abraham and Sarah, who were half-siblings. Similarly, Isaac, Abraham's son, married Rebekah, his cousin, following the customs of the time. The union of Isaac and Rebekah is noteworthy not only because it was culturally acceptable but also because it was seen as divinely blessed. In Genesis 24, Abraham, concerned about finding a suitable wife for his son, sends his servant to Padan Aram to seek a bride among their relatives. The servant encounters Rebekah at a well, and she is chosen to be Isaac's wife. This story highlights the importance of family lineage continuity and the belief in divine guidance in marital arrangements. Another classic example of marriage within the same family occurred after the Great Flood. According to the Bible, after the flood, Noah and his family, his sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth, were tasked with repopulating the earth. Given the limited population, Noah's descendants had no choice but to intermarry among themselves or even with their sisters to fulfill God's mandate to multiply and replenish the earth. Genesis 9 emphasizes the responsibility placed upon Noah and his family to restore humanity, which justifies these unions within the context of that time. These examples emphasize how, in different stages of biblical history, marriage between family members was considered both acceptable and necessary for the continuation of the human race, especially in the aftermath of extraordinary events. It is interesting to note that prohibitions against such unions, as established in Mosaic law, arose much later, approximately 2,500 years after the creation of Adam and Eve. This significant shift in marital regulations marks a turning point in the evolution of human social practices. These laws were instituted as part of the covenant with Moses and reflect the emerging need for clear boundaries as humanity grew and diversified. The prohibitions outlined in Mosaic law can be understood as a divine measure intended to protect humanity from the potential consequences of close relative marriages, including genetic health risks associated with endogamy. The divine regulations against incestuous relationships, as described in the book of Leviticus, are meticulously detailed in chapter 18. These prohibitions cover a wide range of familial relationships, including explicit instructions against sexual relations with parents, siblings, uncles, aunts, nephews, nieces, and other close relatives. The book of Leviticus, as part of the sacred scriptures, represents a practical extension of the covenant established with Moses, underscoring God's attention to detail in regulating familial relationships. It is important to remember that interpretations of these passages are subject to significant variations and are often debated among different religious traditions and theological groups. The understanding of these accounts may vary based on cultural context, doctrinal approaches, and theological perspectives. However, regardless of interpretative differences, one overarching principle remains clear: faith and respect for divine wisdom must prevail. The acceptance of divine sovereignty and trust in God's plans are fundamental principles that guide believers in their journey through biblical narratives. Ultimately, the true understanding of these ancient stories lies in humble acceptance and reverence for the Word of God. If you enjoyed this analysis, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and activate the notification bell. Stay with us for more thought-provoking explorations of biblical mysteries.